The rain had not stopped for 3 days. It turned the dirt road along the Mekong River into thick mud, clinging to every step the woman took. Her name was Mai Lin, and she was 7 months pregnant, exhausted, and running for her life. Only a week earlier, she had been a wife. Now she was a widow. Her husband, Than, had lived outside the law. Not because he was cruel, but because in the broken years after the war, some men survived however they could. Than had smuggled rice, medicine, sometimes gold. The wrong people noticed. When they finally caught him, they didn't bother with mercy. They shot him near the riverbank and left his body as a warning. Mai Lin never even got to say goodbye. Now the same men were looking for her. They believed the child she carried might one day claim revenge, or worse, inherit secrets that were worth killing for. Every sound behind her made her heart race. Motorbikes, voices, dogs. Her feet slipped, and she fell hard to her knees, crying out as pain shot through her belly. "Please, not my baby," she whispered, clutching herself in terror. That was when she heard the sound of an engine, but not the kind she feared. A large black Land Rover slowed beside the road, its tires cutting through the mud with ease. The driver stepped out, a tall man in his early 40s, foreign but fluent in Vietnamese, dressed simply but expensively. This was Daniel Harper, owner of one of the largest cattle ranches and agricultural estates in southern Vietnam. Wealthy, respected, untouchable, he took one look at Mai Lin and understood everything. She was soaked, shaking, barefoot, and clearly pregnant. "Easy," he said gently, holding out his hand. "You're safe right now." Tears streamed down her face as fear finally broke through her strength. "They're coming," she whispered. "My husband is dead. They'll kill me next." Daniel helped her into the vehicle without another word. As they drove, he listened, really listened, as she told him the truth. No lies, no begging, just raw honesty from a woman who had nothing left to lose. When she finished, silence filled the car. Finally, Daniel spoke. "If they find you alone, you won't survive. Vietnam can be unforgiving to widows with no protection." She turned to him, eyes wide. "I don't need money, I just need a name. A powerful one." He stopped the car near his estate gate. After a long moment, he said quietly, "Then you will take mine." Mai Lin stared at him in disbelief. "For now," he continued, "you are Mrs. Harper, my wife. No one will touch you." She placed a trembling hand over her belly as realization set in. This was not love, this was survival, but neither of them knew that this dangerous promise, made on a muddy river road, would change both their lives forever. The Harper estate sat beyond iron gates and tall palm trees, a world apart from the muddy river road where Mai Lin had nearly lost everything. Inside, there were wide fields, grazing cattle, and long buildings filled with workers who bowed respectfully when Daniel's vehicle passed. No one questioned her presence. That was the power of his name. Within hours, word spread across the estate that Mr. Harper's wife had returned from the countryside and was expecting a child. The staff moved quickly. Fresh clothes, hot soup, clean sheets. Mai Lin had never been treated with such quiet dignity in her life. But safety did not bring peace. That night, as rain tapped softly against the windows, Mai Lin lay awake in a guest room meant for royalty. Her hands rested on her belly as fear twisted inside her chest. Every creak of the house sounded like men coming to finish what they'd started. Daniel knocked once before entering. "You didn't eat much," he said, setting a tray beside her bed. "You need strength, for the baby." She finally spoke, the question burning inside her. "Why are you doing this?" Daniel leaned against the wall, his face unreadable. "Because years ago, I watched a woman like you die because no one offered her protection." She looked at him then, not as a savior, but as a man carrying his own ghosts. The next days tested the lie they were living. At the local market, whispers followed them. Daniel's hand rested lightly at Mai Lin's back, steady and deliberate. When a former associate of her husband stared too long, Daniel met the man's gaze without blinking. The message was clear, she belonged to him now. That evening, a black motorbike circled the estate gate. The guards noticed. Daniel noticed too. "They've found you," he said quietly after the rider disappeared into the dark. Panic rose in her throat. "Then I should leave. I won't bring death to your door." He shook his head. "Leaving would kill you faster." That night, Daniel made a decision that changed everything. He moved her into the main house, into the master wing. If anyone asked, the marriage was not new, it had simply been private. When the midwife arrived for an examination, she smiled warmly. "Your husband worries too much," she teased Daniel. My Lin watched his reaction closely. He didn't flinch. He played the role perfectly. Later, alone, she whispered, "This lie is growing." Daniel met her eyes. "Then we must protect it, until you and the child are truly safe." Outside the estate walls, old enemies were closing in. Inside, something unexpected was beginning to grow. Trust. And neither of them was ready to admit how dangerous that could be. By the time My Lin entered her 8th month, the Harper estate no longer felt like borrowed ground. It felt like home. She learned the rhythms of the place, the morning mist over the fields, the low voices of workers at dawn, the way Daniel reviewed accounts before sunrise. He never treated her as property or obligation. He asked her opinions. He listened. That frightened her more than the men hunting her. Because kindness made leaving harder. One afternoon, a government official arrived unannounced, accompanied by 2 security officers. Daniel's estate manager stiffened the moment their vehicle appeared. My Lin's hands went cold. This was not about cattle permits. The official smiled politely, but his eyes were sharp. "We've received reports," he said, "about a woman fitting your wife's description." Daniel did not hesitate. He placed his hand on My Lin's shoulder. "My wife has been here under my protection. Are you accusing me of harboring a criminal?" Silence stretched thin. The official cleared his throat. "No, Mr. Harper. Merely verifying." That night, My Lin couldn't sleep. She found Daniel on the veranda, staring into the dark fields, a glass of untouched whiskey in his hand. "I've put you in danger," she said. "Your reputation, your land, your life." He finally looked at her. "You think I don't know that?" Her voice broke. "Then why keep doing this?" Daniel exhaled slowly. Because somewhere along the way, this stopped being about protection. The words hung between them, heavy and unspoken. A week later, the threat turned real. Shots rang out near the eastern fence just before dawn. Guards returned fire. The attackers fled, but the message was clear: they would not stop. My Lin went into early labor that same night. Pain tore through her as Daniel carried her to the truck, shouting orders as headlights cut through the dark. The hospital was an hour away. Every minute felt like a lifetime. Between contractions, she clutched his sleeve. "If something happens to me, promise me my child won't grow up hunted." Daniel's voice shook for the first time. "I promise you both." Hours later, a baby's cry cut through the sterile hospital air. A son. Daniel stood frozen, emotion crashing through him as the nurse placed the child in My Lin's arms. In that moment, the life felt meaningless. This was family. But outside the hospital doors, the men who wanted My Lin dead were already planning their next move. And Daniel knew, to truly save her, he would have to choose between peace and war. The hospital was no longer safe. Daniel knew it the moment he saw the unfamiliar men lingering near the entrance, too alert, too patient. He didn't wait for confirmation. Within an hour of the baby's birth, he arranged a private transfer back to the estate, using trusted security and back roads known only to locals. The message to their enemies was silent but firm: he was done running. 3 nights later, Daniel invited every person who mattered to a formal gathering at the estate: local officials, business partners, community leaders, even the police commander. It looked like a celebration for the birth of his son. In truth, it was a line drawn in the sand. When the men connected to Than's past finally arrived, Daniel greeted them openly, with witnesses everywhere. He spoke calmly, never raising his voice. "My wife and child are under my legal and personal protection," he said. "Any harm done to them will be answered, financially, politically, and publicly." One of the men laughed. "She's not even yours." Daniel didn't deny it. Instead, he reached for My Lin's hand. "She is now." The room went silent. The next morning, arrests followed. Smuggling records surfaced. Weapons were seized. The men who had ruled through fear were exposed in daylight, powerless against documentation, testimony, and influence they never expected. Weeks passed. The danger faded. One evening, as the sun sank behind the fields, My Lin stood on the veranda with her son in her arms. Daniel joined her, no guards nearby, no shadows to fear. "You don't owe me anything," he said quietly. "The promise I made, it still stands. But the choice is yours." She turned to him, tears in her eyes, not of fear this time, but certainty. "You gave me your name when it was just a shield," she said. "Now I want it because it means something." Daniel exhaled, the weight of months finally lifting. They married quietly, not for protection, not for appearances, but because two broken lives had found steadiness in each other. The child grew up safe, never hunted, never hidden. And in a land that had taken so much from her, My Lin learned this truth. Sometimes, the name that saves you is the one that becomes your home.